Have you had any, sorts of survivor games at Amex? What are you observing? What are you sort of scratching your head saying, can this be? And what are you particularly sort of pleased about?
I would imagine that, there are probably some survivor games going on, but the general sense is of optimism, I have to tell you quite candidly, and I think that's a really powerful thing at a time like this. It's easy to fall into the pit of despair when you see so many things going on around you, and so one of the things that we're trying to do is to keep the positive approach, to keep people engaged on what is working. And American Express thankfully has things that are working, and in a relative, or on a relative scale, the company is very well positioned, and so that makes the optimism a bit higher. But we, like everyone in this industry, have had to go through our share of downsizing as well. And there was a round 1, a round 2, and a recent round 3 that many of you probably read about in the media. And so that creates, regardless of how optimistic or how much we might want to look at the bright side of things, that creates anxiety on a day-to-day basis. It creates challenges for people who are leading our multiple lines of business, and it creates challenges from a talent landscape perspective, because while you've got the one mentality or frame of mind, if you will, around wanting to be here tomorrow and wanting to be among the survivors, you've also got people who are concerned about the long-term health of the company, who may be picking their heads up and looking around and seeing what else is available, albeit not that much right now. So that is a retention strategy unto itself. But I would submit that what is worse for every one of our companies are the people who quit and stay, not the people who leave. And we really need to be cognizant of that internally, because we do have people who are sort of throwing up the white flag, but they're still at their desk, and they're still transacting business and still interacting with colleagues and customers. And so we really are focused on trying to get people engaged on some of those positive factors that Suba outlined for us.
Carrie, that's terrific you shared that. One of my friends at work, colleagues, said that she sees this behavior at work. You have people who are still in love with the company, so those are sort of the newly married. Then you have the people who are the long-time married, who they sort of care about each other, but they have lots of things going on and they have their head to the metal. And then you have those who are what we consider cohabitating, that they're there, but they're not really in love with the place, and that's the shell-shocked. Yes. Moving on to Inesh. This is a competitive environment that all of our industries represent, and we talked a little bit about incivility. Our industries are perhaps less favorably known for cutthroat behavior, competitiveness, stabbing in the back. Incivility, have you observed any of that? What has been surprising to you?
I wouldn't say anything has actually been surprising from the perspective of if you actually take a step back and think about what everybody is actually going through and how people react when they're under stress. That's essentially when, the gloves come off or your best behavior goes out the door and you really start looking out for numero uno. And the items that would help bring people together sometimes in this type of environment actually surface as it relates to pulling people apart. And as we were talking about earlier, when you are in an environment when you're really focused on how do I make certain that I keep the seat that I'm in, when there seems to be a game of musical chairs, but you don't even know what game is being played, or who is going to be at the top, or who do you need to align with, or what am I actually being judged on? When you're in such an environment of uncertainty, you tend to see individuals act out. And so whether you see it across from a business perspective where people are really looking to make certain their name is attached to any specific revenue opportunity that comes in the door, or on the other side of the equation where people are very focused on cost and making certain that they're not the one to put any dollar against their name. And so in terms of how you think about investment and what actually needs to happen at a time like this when you need to be rebuilding, when you need to be positive, sometimes people aren't willing to actually step out and take bold action. They're really looking to just be secure and put their head down. And you see, and as it relates to it, actually interfacing as colleagues to the point that was just made, that it's very challenging from a managerial perspective to motivate employees to sort of say, if you're still here and you did survive, that you have a job, but then the question is, do I really want this job? And oh, by the way, great, I was really stressed for the first 2 rounds as to whether or not I wanted this job, and there was a bit of a campaign to say, oh, give me anything, I'll do anything as long as I can keep my job. But now the reality has come full circle as it relates to you're 3 months down the road, you're 6 months down the road, and oh, by the way, your compensation has been decreased significantly, your workload has been increased significantly, and there's a lot of instability, and the environment you're working in is not as collegial as it was before. And so the overall equation sort of breaks down, and trying to figure out how do you motivate people, how do you keep them positive is very challenging, and how do you make certain that people understand that it begins with you as an individual. It's really about how you can interface one-off to really change and bring a more positive environment to everybody who's working around you, which will help to distinguish you and provide an opportunity as it relates to leadership and how you can...
Now, Ines, you raised a couple of very interesting points, and I want to just sort of drill into 2 of them in particular. You raised the issue of the restructuring that's happened and how jobs have changed, jobs have been reorganized, and during these times there have been opportunities for people to potentially take on more work, but perhaps the salary is less, bonus or compensation expectations are fewer, resources are fewer, but nonetheless there is an opportunity. And along those lines, research suggests that that women have been perceived to believe that they need 90% of the competencies for a role before they put their hand up to be considered, where a man simply has to know how to spell the name of the job.
If that.
And that's generalized. I don't want to bash my male colleagues on the head. What behaviors have you observed? Are you seeing some women just not putting themselves in the game when, in fact, it potentially could be a great opportunity? And what would you say to a colleague who you see doing that?